On today's episode of the Mark Titus Show, the Philadelphia Eagles have won the Super Bowl, which means that football is in the rear view and the nation turns its eyes to college basketball. And what a time to do it. The number one team in the country, Auburn, loses on their home court this weekend. Meanwhile, the number two team in the country, Duke, loses at Clemson. These are two teams that have been more or less dominating all of college basketball. They've obviously not been undefeated. Auburn actually lost to Duke, and then Duke, obviously, as we know, has lost to Kansas and Kentucky. But for months now, I think it had been multiple months, those two teams had distanced themselves from the pack. And on a weekend where football is winding down and the sports world turns its eyes to college basketball to get ready for March Madness, the two teams that had distanced themselves from the pack took a big step back and lost on the exact same day. And now all of a sudden, what we thought we knew about college basketball, we no longer know. Chaos is the norm in this sport, and boy, it's setting up to be a chaotic run to the finish line here. But here's what we're doing today. So I like to do this every year on the show, where it's more of a, for those of you that have been watching the show or listening to the show throughout the college basketball season, this is going to be very dumbed down, and maybe you won't love this episode, but I like to do a what amounts to a college basketball preview for the football fan. I like to, I'm not blind to the fact that most people aren't locked in on college basketball November, December, January. But yeah, this is the time of year. I mean, maybe if you're like a baseball sicko, you're excited about pitchers and catchers reporting. But otherwise, this is our time. It's college basketball time, and frankly, there are a lot of people out there that enjoy March Madness. They enjoy college basketball. They just don't have the time. There's too much football. Mm-hmm. Football's at a point where it's no longer a Saturday for college, Sunday for NFL thing. It is basically 7 days a week for months now, and people in this country love football. So and I understand that, but now it's college basketball time. So I am going to do what amounts to a preview for the football fan, which is to say, here's what you missed. Here's if you're just tuning into college basketball right now in early/mid-February, and you want to get excited about March Madness, but God, there's just so much. There's so many teams, so many players. Who's actually good? Who's bad? What happened to those guys? I watched last year in March Madness. What happened to those guys and those teams? Did those guys all come back? Did those teams fall off? Are they better? What about the Blue Bloods? There are obviously some teams throughout the country that I've become familiar with. Is this a season where the Blue Bloods are going to reign supreme? Is this more of like a newcomer to the party type thing? What does the player of the year race look like? What are the NBA draft guys? What are they doing? Like I kind of like college, but I honestly like NBA more. So like, talk to me about the draft prospects. There's been a lot of basketball played. There's a ton of interesting stuff. I think it's been a great college basketball season so far, and I generally think most seasons are great, but I do think this one has been particularly awesome, and we'll lay out the reasons why. But I for this episode, I like to do this every year. I like to do the college basketball preview for the football fan. And again, if you're a sicko pervert college basketball fan like I am, and you've been listening to every second of every show, this might feel a little redundant. It might feel a little elementary. It might feel unnecessary, and I understand that. But I don't know. It'll be fun anyway to just do a reset. Maybe you need to hear this too, to just do a big reset and everything that's happened so far. Let's just all take a big deep breath, and now let's lock in for the next couple months. We're less than 2 months away from a new national champion being crowned, or will be a new national champion, or will be UConn for the third straight year.
Tune in.
But that's what we're doing today. We're doing that's the best way I can describe it, is the college basketball preview for the football fan coming up. Let's get into it. All right, we have a ton to get to. We're gonna do our best to segment it and make it easily digestible for everybody. There will be a ton of information. I wanted to dumb it down the wrong way to say it, because that makes me feel like I'm smarter than everybody, and But I want to make it like, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of like, here's who Nebraska's bringing off the bench, and here's what you need to know about him. I want to make it like a good starting point. Again, for if you haven't really been paying attention to college basketball, here's what you need to know, and you can kind of dive in and figure it out on your own from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's 5 weeks till Selection Sunday. This is the crash course.
It's a crash course. Yeah. But there is a ton to get to, obviously, because people. The beauty of the sport is that people are interested in it for different reasons, and some people might not give a shit about the Blue Bloods. They'd be like, shut the fuck up about Kansas. I don't need to hear about Kansas anymore. Tell me about who's going to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. That's why I watch college. Anyway, there's a lot to get to. I want to start here. because I think this might be interesting. This is like the previously on part of the show. Like you ever like binge watch a show, and I'm doing it with Lost right now. They like every episode they're just like previously on Lost. They do it with Breaking Bad too. They catch you up on the
what has just happened. Yeah. So
yeah.
we're going all the way back.
If you forget the last couple episodes, like here's what you missed type thing. So we're going back.
Okay.
I want to start by going back. If you the last college basketball you watched was last year's Final Four, last year's March Madness. Here's an update on some of those teams. So UConn obviously ended the season as a national champion. They've won back-to-back national championships. They entered this season the two-time champs, and Dan Hurley said we should be ranked number 1. The UConn report is a little disappointing. They're a little disappointing this year. They lost 4 starters from last year's team. Now, you might remember from 2 years ago they won the national championship. Lost a lot of starters. They plugged in the younger guys, and it was just kind of it was what you love to see out of a successful college basketball program, which is like a next man up sort of thing. You build a culture where the guys that come in as freshmen and sophomores sit behind the juniors and seniors. Juniors and seniors win. They move on. The freshmen and sophomores get a little older. Now they get to run the show. And UConn kind of had that a little bit. Obviously, they were dipping in the transfer portal and helping out a little bit there. But that was sort of the thinking from national championship year 1 to national championship year 2. They're trying to carry that over into year 3. Dan Hurley thought that he had the team. Mm-hmm. A lot of basketball left. He just might, but I got to be honest, where we're at right now, UConn has been one of the bigger, not the biggest disappointment, one of the bigger disappointments in college basketball. They can't play defense to save their lives. The transfer portal the big pickup they got was Aiden Mahaney from St. Mary's. He's kind of been nothing for him. Mm-hmm. Solo Ball is a name you might remember if on the team last year. He was a freshman last year, played a little bit. He's their leading scorer. He's a bucket. The offense is still good. You watch UConn, they still run beautiful sets. They still score the basketball. Their defense is atrocious, and they had a really bad Maui Invitational. After Maui, Dan Hurley was basically positioned himself as the big villain in college basketball, where he's like, we're never going to play a multi-team event again. We'll never do like one of those tournaments again. There was a moment earlier in the season where a ref turned his back to him and he yelled at him and said, I'm the best coach in this fucking sport. Don't turn your back to me. Dan Hurley UConn has taken a big step back from being the team that runs the sport. They're still going to make the tournament probably, although that's not as like they're on more of the bubble than I think UConn fans realize, but they are still very much on the right side of the bubble. But they're probably like a 7, 8, maybe 9 seed right now. Like their resume isn't as they had the after the Maui debacle, they righted the ship and beat I think Baylor, Texas, and Gonzaga. Yeah, they had like a good stretch. Like we're kind of undid the Maui thing, but yeah, UConn is not a juggernaut this year. I guess that's the big bullet point on UConn, but they're still like good-ish.
It's interesting because to hear you recap that, it makes sense. They lost 4 starters from last year's team, but coming into this year, Danny Hurley. For those of you that miss it, you probably haven't heard about Danny Hurley since he was contemplating the Lakers job.
That's right, yeah.
He has become quite the asshole.
That's right.
In this league. And he was, like Mark said, he was the one, they were ranked 3rd in the preseason poll, and he was offended by it.
Yeah.
And
why are we not number 1?
Why are we not number 1? And now I believe they're 4th in the Big East right now. So yeah, they've been a disappointment, and he has been a villain. I
would say if you have the attitude like when March rolls around. Now again, ton of basketball left to be played. Maybe they can lock in and figure it out a little bit better between now and when Selection Sunday rolls around. But as it stands right now, I think if a bracket came out today, a lot of America would be like, I don't give a shit what their seed is. I don't give a shit who they're playing. I see UConn in the bracket. I'm making them go to the Final Four, win the national championship. I would be very, very cautious.
So that's why you listen to this Crash Course show.
That's why you got to listen. Yeah,
they're probably an 8 right now.
Here's a reference for you football fans. You know the Kansas City Chiefs? You know how they had won 2 in a row, and everyone was like,
"Who blindly?" They got Mahomes.
Hey,
they got Danny Hurley.
They were the favorite in the Super Bowl last night. Yeah, that's a good analogy. I would say although the Chiefs did make the Super Bowl, and I think if UConn made the national championship and lost by, that would still be a pretty good season. Yeah, they can score. They can definitely score. That's not going to be an issue. It's the want to on defense, but I also think it's just like the personnel. I just don't think they have great personnel on defense. That's what makes me worry about them quote unquote figuring it out or flipping the switch, is that I just don't think they have personnel on defense to even if they do lock in, like I don't think it's going to be enough for them. So anyway, they're probably going to make the tournament, could make the Sweet 16, whatever. They do not feel like a three-peat type team though so far this year. Other teams you remember, Purdue obviously loses to UConn last year, has the National Player of the Year in Zach Edey for the last 2 years. Edey has moved on to the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm sure everybody already knew that. Purdue was a lot of questions in the sense of how do you replace the two-time National Player of the Year, who was also kind of became by the time Zach Edey had finished his career at Purdue, and especially in that national championship game, he was their offense. He was the guy. He was like the entirety of that team. They just dump the ball into him, and when he's not shooting it, he's the guy that's drawing double, triple, quadruple teams and then kicking it out to shooters. So without the gravity of Zach Edey just drawing so much attention with the defense, what is Purdue going to look like? And the answer is pretty good, actually. Mm-hmm. Like they're the Big Ten. We'll get to the nitty gritty of all the conferences later, but the Big Ten is not awesome this year, and Purdue is Purdue is at the top of the Big Ten. And it feels like they might win the conference again this year. It's not quite as good as it's been in years past, so I don't know how impressive that's going to be. But Purdue has two guys, Braden Smith, who you probably remember. He was the point guard who, to be completely fair, for most people, the last time they saw him, got swallowed alive by UConn's length and athleticism on the perimeter. Tristan Newton and fucking Stephon Castle. Why could I not remember his name? Stephon Castle and Tristan Newton last year in the national championship just destroyed Purdue's guards, right? So a lot of people saw that last year. Maybe you think like, you're going to turn on a Purdue game, you're going to see Fletcher Loyer, you're going to see Braden Smith, and you're going to say, last time I saw these guys, they shit their pants against far superior athletes. And to be completely honest, I do think that's kind of hard to unsee. That is hard to unsee, but I will say what we've seen from Braden Smith this year, he's probably the third best player in the country. I'll explain later why that's not as much of an insult as it might sound. Mm-hmm. But he probably is the third best player in the country. He's been fucking balling. He is a quintessential point guard, just the guy that it just seems to be under control at all times, knows how to get to his spots, which is like, that 15-foot fadeaway. He's got that Chris Paul, comes off a ball screen, but he's not hurried. He's kind of got the defender on his hip, gets to the elbow, hits a little fadeaway, and if a double comes, he throws a perfect pocket pass, can throw a lot. Like he's kind of mastered the point guard position. But yeah, it is a fair concern if you are worried about the idea of like, what if we just put like a 6'6" guy who's a freak athlete on him? Mm-hmm. What can he do then? That's not to say he's going to be completely shut down, but yeah, Braden Smith has become the point guard for Purdue last year, who, yeah, again, frankly, did not leave a great final taste in fans' mouth maybe in the national championship. He has been fucking awesome this year. He's going to be a first-team All-American, probably going to be Big Ten Player of the Year. But then Purdue also has Trey Kaufman-Renn, who is the big guy that has not really replaced Zach Edey, but has sort of replaced Zach Edey. And Purdue, long story short, Purdue might have the two best players in the Big Ten.
In the whole conference, yeah.
In the whole conference. And that's pretty much what you need to know about Purdue. Their issue, though, defense was a problem for long stretches of the season. They're getting better. They're getting a lot better defensively, especially lately. And then I don't know about their depth, and I don't think Purdue fans know about their depth, and I don't think Matt Painter knows about their depth, and I think that there are three guys they trust. It's Fletcher Loyer, it's Braden Smith, it's Trey Kaufman-Renn. Outside of that, it is just a revolving door of like, who's got it today? Mm-hmm. We'll find out. Let's tip the ball and we'll figure it out later. But yeah, that's the Purdue scouting report. Not as good as last year, but they took less of a step back, I would say, than UConn did. UConn went from like juggernaut to like mid, just an average tournament team. Purdue went from like, they weren't as good as UConn last year. Obviously, we saw that in the championship game, but they went from elite to pretty good. They're still like pretty good.
And they're playing well right now too. Yeah. They've won 11 of their last 12. When they started off, they lost their first Big Ten game to Penn State, and the world was like, "Oh my gosh, like is this what we were all expecting? They're going to take a huge step back." Matt Painter still got the boys going here.
Yeah, yeah. So Purdue. I could see. I'll put it this way: if Purdue makes a Final Four this year, I wouldn't be stunned. Mm-hmm. I would be a little surprised. Like I don't think they have quite the talent, and this doesn't feel, when you think of the last 20 years of Purdue basketball, this doesn't feel like a particularly special team when you stack them up against some of the other really, really good Purdue teams. But crazier things have happened. I don't think they by no means would be like the worst Final Four team we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like NC State made it last year, and
especially with going into this past Saturday, we had, like you said at the top, we had Auburn and Duke, and then everyone else. Purdue is right there in that everyone else where they can beat anyone, they can lose to anyone.
Other Final Four teams, NC State sucks. They're terrible. They basically lost they weren't even that good last year. They just got hot at the right time and rode DJ Burns and DJ Horn, and they had seniors that Casey Morsell was great for them last year. Yeah, I'm trying to think of all the other guys. They just the stars aligned for NC State last year, which isn't to say it didn't count and it was fraudulent or whatever. That's why we love college basketball. Stories like this can happen, but I think they were expected to take a big step back, and they kind of did. Mm-hmm. But also on top of that, they weren't even like I said. That was shocking that if Virginia fouls up 3 in the ACC tournament, NC State doesn't even make the tournament.
Right. And then they went on a Final Four run.
And instead, they went to the Final Four. People forget that Tony Bennett chose not to foul. He was up 3, and then was it Morsell banked in a 3, or was it who was that? I don't know. It was God damn it, who was that? I know who it was. I think I know who it was. Was it? No, it was
O'Connell.
It was O'Connell. It was Michael O'Connell. Was the white guy, wasn't it? Michael O'Connell banked in a 3. Anyway, NC State.
They're bad.
DJ Burns is gone, so whatever. If you had fun watching that NC State run, don't tune into NC State this year. Mm-hmm. They're 9-14. They're just not. They're not good. They've lost 8 in a row. NC State's irrelevant. Alabama is the one team that I want to talk about, and I saved them for last for a reason. Alabama. They entered the. What were they preseason? 3rd, 4th.
They ended up being number 4.
They were 4.
No.
They were 2.
They were 2. It was Kansas and Alabama.
It was Houston was 4.
Right. It was Kansas and Alabama were supposed to be.
That's right.
The most talented. Bring back. Bring in.
So Alabama basically brings back everybody. That's not entirely true. Obviously, there are a couple, but like the guys you probably know from that Alabama run last year, which is to say like Mark Sears and Grant Nelson. Like those were the two best players last year. Those are going to be the 2 best players on this year's team. They are back. Alabama was a quote unquote bring everyone back. They were preseason number 2 for a reason, and that was because they went to the Final Four last year and have a lot of roster turnover. Mark Sears was my pick preseason to win National Player of the Year. He's not going to. He's not going to win National Player of the Year. Very good chance he's still going to be a first-team All-American, though. I would probably put him on my first-team All-American team at this point in the season. He's been fucking awesome. Bama started out slow-ish. We've talked about it on the show a lot, but obviously I'm assuming a lot of you were not tuning in. So if you're tuning in now, I said slow-ish because they're sitting at 20-3. The poll is going to come out today. There's a chance they're number 1.
That's a discussion to be had, but yeah, there's a good chance.
There's a good chance that they're number 1.
I would put Auburn still, but
yeah, they're probably going.
Point being, number 1 and 2 lost, and they're sitting at 3.
And the reason I say they started slowish is because their first big marquee game was at Purdue, where Braden Smith outplayed Mark Sears on an individual level. Mark Sears kind of disappeared, but also Purdue was just in control from start to finish. It was one of the first like marquee games of the season, in mid-November. It was Bama's 4th game of the year, and Purdue just looked like the better team from start to finish, and that was a surprise because Bama was the team that brought everyone back, and Purdue was the team that was trying to replace Zach Edey. So we thought Purdue was the one with the question marks, and Purdue's gonna, Purdue's the unfinished product that we'll check back in March and see what they've got. Bama is ready to rock out of the gate, and so for them to lose in that fashion at Purdue, that was a head scratcher. The very next game against Illinois, who's a pretty good team. Bama wins. They score 100 points, and they win semi-convincingly against Illinois. But Mark Sears goes scoreless, which was also a head-scratcher. So November was a little weird. They lose to Oregon, who's not awful, but that was still the game they probably should have won. And by the time November ends, you're like, is Mark Sears is he not as good as we thought? Is he broken? Is he hurt? Is there something going on? Is Bama not quite as good as we thought? There were a lot of questions about that. Since the calendar turned to December, they have lost 1 game. Granted, it was at home. They lost by 10 to Ole Miss, but they have righted the ship in a big way, and they look very much national title good and very much like the team we thought they would be at the start of the season.
Yeah, I mean, In November, again, against Oregon in that game, they also lost Latrell Wrightsell, and that was like,
that's right.
Oh, there's an injury now. They've already lost twice. This team,
their best shooter,
isn't going to be as hyped up. They are now officially on a roll.
The story with Bama too. They love the push tempo. They love to shoot threes. That's been consistent since Nate Oates has gotten there.
Mm-hmm.
This year's team has not shot particularly well from the 3-point line. Wrightsell was their best shooter towards Achilles.
Achilles tendon, yep.
Towards Achilles. He's out for the year. The rest of the guys, they have capable shooters. They have streaky shooters. They as a team have not been shooting the ball awesome. Like if I forget where they're at now, and
they're 187th
in the country. Yeah, so they're middle of the pack 3-point shooting team, which becomes a problem when you shoot them in such high volume, and as they do, and they love to shoot threes and push tempo, like I said, but. They've been locking in a little bit more on the defensive end. Last year's team, even though they made the Final Four, was not very good defensively, and that was one concern I had this year. Was are they going to be better? They are better defensively. I don't think they're quite as good offensively, but Bama is they're national title good. So Bama is one of the Final Four teams. They're of the Final Four teams last year. Bama is in my opinion clearly the best.
Yeah.
Clearly the best. It would go Bama, Purdue, UConn, and then NC, and then like a huge mountain of dog shit, and then NC State's at the bottom of the pile. Quick break to talk about our friends at Rhoback. It's 2025 and it's basketball season, and Rhoback is back. By now you know how much we love Rhoback, but what we really love is all their new releases. Rhoback recently released their new men's huddle hoodie. It is different than the Hezzy hoodie, which you have all gotten to know. But the huddle hoodie is awesome. The fabric has a really comfortable cotton poly blend, so it's both warm and has a nice stretch to it. They've sent me a couple. I wear them all the time. In fact, yesterday I wanted to wear one as I was watching the Super Bowl, and I had a catastrophe on my hands because both of them were dirty and in the hamper, and I had that like momentary like, do I just wear them dirty? Do I throw them in the dryer or like just spritz a little Febreze on them and do it? In the end, I decided to not be a slob, and I just cried that I didn't have the huddle hoodie to wear it, but it is so awesome. I wear it every day that I can. Every day it comes out of the laundry, I'm like, yep, there we go. I get to wear it, and then it goes right back in the laundry again. Second, the Rhoback Sprint joggers are my new favorite joggers. They are so easy to move in. You can rock them for a quick game of pickup while you're just hanging out. They're lightweight, have a perfect amount of stretch while keeping a soft feel. They're great to work out and great to go jogging in. Great to do just about anything. It's so comfortable. So use code Titus on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off your first purchase through the end of this week. RHOBACK.com. 20% off all hoodies, joggers, and more with code Titus, TITUS, Rhoback.com. Other things you might like that might be of note. Hunter Dickinson is still playing college basketball. That's not a joke. We like to joke on this show. That is not a joke. Hunter Dickinson is still at Kansas.
And still doing Hunter Dickinson things.
Turn on a Kansas game if you don't believe me. I swear to God, he is still playing. If you find yourself watching Kansas and you see Hunter Dickinson on the floor, you are not watching ESPN Classic. I promise you. That is a live game that you're watching. The same could be said about R.J. Davis at North Carolina. He's still there. We'll get into North Carolina in a little bit. They're not having a great year, but R.J. Davis is still playing. Caleb Love is still at Arizona. He's still playing college basketball, believe it or not. Mark Sears, I already talked about. He's a senior on this year's Bama team. I'm trying to think of other guys. Zakai Ziegler on Tennessee, the little short guy that's got the what would you call it? Not dreadlocks, but they're like the pony, the pigtails. Kind of got pigtails a little bit.
I don't know if he has pigtails.
I don't know. Pigtails go off the side.
I don't know if he has.
What are pigtails?
He's got Cody. What's he got?
What do you call that hair? What do you call the Zakai Ziegler like dueling ponytails coming down his? I'm trying to describe Zakai Ziegler.
He might have those might be pigtails.
He's the 5'9" guy that fucking great defender, heart and soul of Tennessee. Trying to describe him for people that remember, and then they're gonna go, "Oh yeah, I remember that guy. He's the guy with the fucking."
He's got pigtails because he has two of them. If it's two dreadlocks means pigtails.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, you guys know who I'm talking about. If not, you'll figure it out soon enough. All those guys are back. Yeah. So there's that. So moving on to this year. I'm gonna do some broad stuff, and then you can pepper like specific questions there. You can I want to steer like the broad thing, and then I'll let you tell me what I missed and what I need to talk about more specifically. So stories to watch. This is just like your big bullet points on this season. I kind of said this at the top, but I'll dive into it a little more now. Auburn and Duke are the two teams that are head and shoulders better than everybody else, we thought. Now they just lost on Saturday. I don't know how much we're going to overreact to those losses because they have been for the totality of this season, I still think that they have demonstrated that they are head and shoulders better than everybody else. The difference between the two, Auburn has played the hardest schedule in college basketball. Auburn won the Maui Invitational. They played Houston in Houston before they even went to Maui. Their one loss before this weekend was they played right when they got back from Maui. They went to Duke. They go to Cameron Indoor Stadium. They lose to Duke in the head-to-head. Duke has not played as tough of a schedule, but Duke is your quintessential young Duke, your Coach K, John Calipari type team where you have just a lot of great freshmen. I'm overstating it a little bit. That's not exactly what their team is, but Duke has the three-star freshman, Cooper Flagg, who I'm sure most of you probably know is we'll talk about him more in a second. Con Knippel's a cold-ass white boy they got, a shooter, scorer. He's a freshman that's going to be a lottery pick. And then Kaman Malawach is this tall dude from Africa that they brought in that is a big Luol Deng fan and wears number 9 for them because of Luol Deng and is a 7-foot rim protector. A little raw, excuse me, as a lot of the African players are. He fits that mold where it feels like I actually don't remember when he started playing basketball, but he does fit that mold of like a guy who started playing basketball when he was like 15 or something and is slowly figuring it out. But he is an elite rim protector. Duke is very good defensively. They have Tyrese Proctor back, who you'll remember from Duke, from previous Duke teams. He's kind of the if there is such thing as the leader of the team, it's probably him, although Cooper Flagg is sort of becoming that guy as well. They have a ton of talent. They are very, very long and athletic, but they're also like young, and the 3 losses this year, including this Saturday, have all come down to crunch time, and Duke has more or less like fucked it up in like a clutch type moment. And
it's been the same guy too.
And it's sort of been the same guy.
Like if we're talking storylines, if you are truly new to the game today, Cooper Flagg has aced the test times a million. He's awesome. He's probably going to be player of the year. He is also in their 3 losses. Had one common occurrence, which is a late game turnover from him either spinning into the defense or slipping on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're gonna talk about the player of the year race, but that's kind of the Duke thing. The ACC is dreadful this year, very, very bad. Now, not every team is very, very bad, but the conference as a whole is bad. And up until Saturday, obviously they're not going to go undefeated now, but up until Saturday, there was talk of Duke going undefeated in the ACC, which was very reasonable. It was I think they were favored by 6.5, 6 or something on Saturday. That was the closest. That will be the and obviously they lost and it's a moot point now, but even like a month ago, that was the one game you circled as like this will be the smallest margin of them being favored. This will be the smallest spread, I should say, for Duke, and that'll be true the rest of the season. They'll be favored by probably 10 plus in every ACC game. They play Illinois in Madison Square Garden in a weird one-off game coming up. But as far as the ACC games, Duke will be heavily favored in all of them, and that is interesting only insofar as like when you're talking about Auburn and Duke, the SEC is loaded. We'll talk about that in a second. The Auburn schedule has been outrageous. Auburn is probably still going to be the number one. They still have to play Bama twice, so maybe Bama can make it interesting. Auburn will probably, based on resume, be the number 1 overall seed in this tournament. Duke, though, to me, and reasonable minds can disagree, but I think Duke is still, despite coming off of this loss and not playing as tough of a schedule, and they've lost more games than Auburn and all that, I think when Duke is playing at their best, if every team in the NCAA tournament, if every team in the country plays A-plus their version of A-plus basketball, I think Duke is the best team. I think Duke has just so much talent. I think their defense is so good. But Auburn has earned the right to call themselves the best team because they have, throughout the totality of the season, they've played literally the hardest schedule in the country. And they've basically won every single game.
Well, that's why you're catching us at an interesting time, because if you would have asked us on Saturday morning, Duke and Auburn were so far above and beyond everyone else, because in this crazy college basketball season we've had where you might beat a team by 30 and then you lose it to the same team by 20. There's been so much chaos.
Yeah.
They hadn't lost at all.
They've really not lost at all.
Duke was running the table in the ACC, and Auburn had lost to Duke.
Yeah.
So they were head and shoulders above, and it's weird now because I'm not going to overreact. If I was making an AP poll this morning, number 1 would be Auburn. Number 2 would be Duke.
Yeah.
They everyone else has been allowed to lose.
Yeah. Yeah, so Duke, they're two. They had 3 combined losses. Auburn's was 2. Duke coming. They had just won in Maui. They like I said, they went on the road to play Houston. Then they go to Maui. Then they fly back home and get a couple days off, and then go to Duke. It was just like an incredible run of their schedule where Duke beat them and it was kind of. I don't want to say dominating, but it was like a standard win for Duke. It wasn't like Duke pulled it out of their ass. Like Duke looked like the better team on that night. But you kind of understood it from Auburn's point of view, where it's like a gauntlet of a schedule. You're flying all over the world playing these, so you're not really panicking about that. And up until Saturday, that was Auburn's only loss. And then on the Duke side of things, their 2 losses were to Kentucky and Kansas, who we'll talk about both of those teams here in a second, but they are. Very, very experienced team. You have a Duke. It was early in the season, late game situation where you're playing against 2 teams that are loaded with like 5th-year seniors, 4th-year seniors, and you're a very young team. Where as the season wore on and Duke kept stacking wins, you look back on those 2 losses and you're like, I mean, I don't want to overreact to those. Like those are very reasonable losses as well, to have freshmen in clutch time moments against blue blood teams that are super old. Kind of. Fuck up. Like that's not something you really panic about. Now we did see it again against Clemson, but yeah, up until Saturday, that was kind of the story. Was like Auburn had 1 loss, Duke had 2 losses, and all of those losses were like pretty excusable. Very excusable. It was like pretty like, yeah, dude, whatever, shit happens. Like you're not going to be perfect. It wasn't like they were getting blown out or There weren't like massive red flags that were coming out of the losses really. So that was the stage up until Saturday. I think with those 2 losing, and I think given how well Alabama is playing, I would tier it now. I think Bama has earned the right to be in the same tier as Auburn and Duke, but I still think there's a gap between those 3 and the rest. Now again, some people would disagree, but I feel like it's Auburn, Duke, and Bama. Then the next tier down is probably Houston and Tennessee and Florida. Iowa State might be in there, but they've lost a few in a row. I think they won this weekend, but they had lost 3 in a row. They've been a little banged up, but Iowa State is very, very good. And then you start to get into like Purdue and St. John's, like what does their ceiling actually look like? But yeah, I think that the top 2 teams, and now Bama has played their way maybe to make it a top 3. In my estimation, are it's not a massive gap. It's not like Houston and Tennessee and Florida and like that group can't win the national championship. But right now, it feels to me, if the tournament started today, I don't think it's a chaotic, wide open, holy shit, anybody can win this thing until Duke and Auburn and Bama all lose.
I agree.
Once all 3 of those lose, then I'm like, fuck, anybody can win this. But until then, like you could have upsets galore, and if one of those 3 teams are still in it, I'm like, well, it's still going to be, at the end of the day, it's going to be one of these 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you. Once you get those tier 1s out, I know you have tier 2 being like 6 teams right now. I mean, there could be 10, 15 teams that could win.
Yeah. Other stories of note, the SEC is the best conference by a wide margin, which might be surprising to a lot of people. SEC is obviously a football conference. The football in the SEC was not as good this year. That was the big talking point. In college football is how the SEC's fallen off, and I don't know if it was a coincidence, but the timing is hilarious because as SEC football takes a big step back, SEC basketball has been dominant. The conference as a whole dominated the non-conference schedule. It wasn't just the teams at the top. It was like South Carolina beat Clemson. Clemson is the second, probably third best. I don't know in the ACC. They just beat Duke. Clemson's one of the best teams in the ACC. South Carolina is probably the worst team in the SEC, and South Carolina beat Clemson. So it's like even like the teams at the bottom of the SEC are pretty good for. They're not like South Carolina's not gonna make the tournament. LSU's not gonna make the tournament, but top to bottom, the SEC is as deep and as good as any conference has ever been in the history of college basketball, and I mean that sincerely. And it's gonna sound absurd because you remember some years from the old Big East and the old ACC, and in the end, maybe the teams at the very top aren't as strong as those teams. As you think back to like the heyday of the ACC and the heyday of the Big East. But I do think from top to bottom, and I think that given what they did in the non-conference, the SEC has earned the right to say that they are like historically good. In the end, it's going to be the NCAA tournament. Like how the conference shows out in the NCAA tournament is going to be the lasting legacy of this season, but they are in position to get 3 1 seeds. I think 3 1 seeds is very, very likely, actually. Auburn, Bama, and Duke more or less have 1 seeds locked up. The 4th one is probably going to be Tennessee. And then from there, you might get 2 seeds as well with Texas A&M and Florida. So you have a situation where like 5 of the top 6 teams might be SEC teams.
And like you said, it's not just the top heaviness. It is the record, I believe, is 11. 2011, the Big East sent 11 teams to the tournament.
Yeah.
Arkansas, who I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit, currently resides at 14th in the SEC.
Yeah.
And that's a team that you will be talking about, like, okay, are they on the bubble? That's the 14th team. The record is 11.
Could get as many as 14 bids. That's crazy. They could get 14 bids.
You said it, but the fact that South Carolina is 0-10 in the SEC. They have not won 1 SEC game, and Clemson has 2 losses in the ACC, and they beat them.
They're 0-10. Oh, my God. Now, what the game was at South Carolina, it's a rivalry, yada, yada, yada. You can, downplay it all you want, but, I mean, that is absurd. They're 0-10 in the SEC, and they beat – is Clemson second in the ACC now?
Louisville is as well.
Louisville, they're tied? Yeah, Clemson's tied for second in the ACC, and South Carolina beat them. So yeah, the SEC is dominant, and if they get 14 bids, that's absurd. That's just, I mean, I know we're in a bloated, the Pac-12 died, and we're in a bloated conference era where, maybe this will be the norm. Maybe like these super conferences getting 11 plus is going to become more common because just the dynamic of college sports. But we've never seen this before, so it might be normal moving forward. I can't say that for sure. What I can tell you right now is we've never seen this before, and this is crazy, especially from a conference that's been known as a football conference for so long. All right, another big bullet point that we could spend some time and really flesh out that is super interesting about this season and will continue to be interesting all the way through. It'll be interesting for years to come, to be completely honest. The Player of the Year race, the National Player of the Year race, I would argue, as I thought about it yesterday, I was putting notes together for this show, and this isn't even me trying to sell people on college basketball and carrying water for the sport. I'm quick to say when games are dog shit. I'm quick to say when I have no problem saying like this game kind of sucked or this tournament's going to suck or this, we don't have as much talent this year. Last year's freshman class was really, really bad. I would talk about that often on the show. Like, yeah, this high, these freshmen just aren't very good, or there's not a lot of hype behind some of these young players, whatever. I like to think I'm pretty fair when I criticize stuff. So, I think I'm a pretty fair judge, and I'm trying to be level-headed with all this. And still, in spite of all that, I do think that this is probably the most interesting National Player of the Year race I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I mean, it is for the gamblers out there. The odds this year, and Titus will get into it. It's been a 2-horse race for a long time.
Yeah,
but there was a time where Janai Broome was the heavy favorite, and there's just no way that Janai Broome's not going to get it. Then Janai Broome gets hurt, just as Cooper Flagg is dropping career performances and putting on highlights,
right.
And there was no way he could possibly lose it, and now they are right there.
So those are the 2 players, Janai Broome of Auburn, Cooper Flagg of Duke. If you are a casual basketball fan, you probably don't need Cooper Flagg explained to you. You've probably heard his name. You're probably well aware he's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft and is a phenom and reclassified. Is supposed to be in high school right now, reclassified so he could come to Duke and get to the NBA quicker. Janai Broome, but this is part of the reason why I think this is the most interesting National Player of the Year race. One, it truly is like a 50-50 thing. Like you could ask 10,000 people and it'd be like split right down the middle of who people believe deserves the award more. But on top of it being a 50-50 deal, I think both of the stories of these guys are polar opposites and is a great example of what makes college basketball great is the variety. Is you have Janai Broome, who's a 5th-year senior, transferred to Auburn from Morehead State a couple years ago, is playing on – I didn't even mean to make this point right now. These 2 teams are the 2 best teams in the country, Auburn and Duke. I should have said that at the top, that adds to it. But you have a 5th-year senior who is probably a future NBA player. I think Janai Broome is going to play in the NBA. Like I think he's shown enough with his shooting and his playmaking and his defense and all that. He's going to be an NBA player.
Currently
he's going to be a
first
rounder, right?
Yep, end of the first round.
End of the first round. Yeah, he's going to be an NBA player. But coming into the season, I don't think that would have been. I don't think he was necessarily I think you could have, if you would have said this sentence, Janai Broome will not play in the NBA, no one would have probably fought you on it.
Well,
it would have been like, I think he's got a chance, but no one would have been like, you fucking dumb bitch. Now they probably would, but that's what makes it compelling is you have the guy who's the phenom number 1 pick, freshman, turned 18 this season, right around Christmas, turns 18. You also have the 22, 23, I don't know how old Jani Broome, 5th-year guy who's been around the block a million times, and is playing for a program in Auburn that is they made the Final Four in 2019, and Auburn fans will tell you they got fucked by the refs in that game, but for the most part, Auburn is not a program that is like they're very much still an up and coming program. Looking to they've done it for a few years now, but they still have that feeling of like there's like a groundswell of support behind the program, and they're pushing themselves up to that elite tier. Whereas Cooper Flagg is at Duke, which is the upper echelon of college basketball. I think all of those factors make it super interesting. On top of that, you have Cooper Flagg, who's averaging 19.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, 4.1 assists. You have Jani Broome, who's averaging 18.2 points, 11 rebounds, 3.2 assists. They're both great defenders. Jani Broome blocks more shots. Cooper Flagg gets more steals, but he also blocks a good number of shots. Like, I think both of these guys are among the very best defenders in college basketball. They're both, at times, their entire offense. Now, Auburn, I think, runs a little more balanced offense and has – Duke has more talent, but Auburn runs like has more guys that like step up out of nowhere. Where Duke, you kind of have more. It's a little more predictable of the guys who are going to do all the scoring for Duke. But there are stretches with both of these teams where you watch on offense and it's just Jani Broome's doing everything or Cooper Flagg is doing everything. And on top of that, they're two of the best defenders in the sport. I think it's as compelling as a National Player of the Year race since. I mean, 2006 is the one that stands out to me with Morrison and Redick. That was when I was a senior in high school, so I was like really into – that was probably like peak college basketball to me. I was just like the right age. But Redick like distanced himself from Morrison a little bit, and it wasn't quite as close as – it was very, very interesting, and it was fun to talk about, but I think in the end it was like Redick kind of was the no-brainer. I'm trying to think of what – like – Buddy Hield and Denzel Valentine, was that 2016? That was 2016, I think. That one was really interesting. I still think 2018 should have been closer with Trae Young and Jalen Brunson, but I'm on an island in that one. Trae Young led the country in scoring and assists, and somehow like didn't have a realistic shot to win the award because his team sucked. But yeah, those are the three that probably come to mind. But I don't think any of those three are as one close, but two is interesting.
I think the teams matter. Like you're throwing out Trae Young, fine, but we're talking about the two best teams in the country head and shoulders above everyone, with the two best candidates head and shoulders above everyone.
Cooper Flagg has the head-to-head trump card that they've played each other. Cooper Flagg played slightly better. Jani Broome did not play poorly, although he did foul out. But Jani Broome had 20 points and 7 boards and 3 assists and fouled out in that game. Cooper Flagg had 22, 9, and 4 and did not foul out and got the win. And Duke beat Auburn. But then the flip side is that Jani Broome has played a way harder schedule than is probably going to be on the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. So Cooper Flagg, you could argue, is doing against lesser competition, putting up his numbers. And then Cooper Flagg also, if you're being a Cooper Flagg hater, which I'm not, I'm top Glazer. I'm the top Cooper Flagg Glazer out there.
That's true.
But if we're being honest, Cooper Flagg and Duke's 3 losses, you said it earlier, Cooper Flagg has had the ball late and turned it over. Frankly, he just turned the ball over. Against Clemson, he slipped. I do feel bad for him in that one. Like, I don't think that was his fault, really. I do think
the first two were poor decisions almost.
First two were like, put your head down. I'm gonna just spin to the middle. There was a clip that went semi-viral against Kentucky. Mark Pope, Kentucky's coach, in a timeout before the play was like, Cooper Flagg's gonna spin to the middle and we'll be there when he does. And then he spun to the middle and they stole the ball and everyone was like, damn, that was pretty good coaching. But yeah, the first two against Kentucky and Kansas were just kind of boneheaded freshman mistakes, just being a little sloppy. And the Clemson one was just a slip. But those are, if you do want to be a hater and poke holes, if you're an Auburn fan, you want to poke holes and pump up your own guy, tear down the other guy to pump your guy up, you'd be like, hey man, the three losses in crunch time, Cooper Flagg kind of fucked it up. But to be completely honest, Cooper Flagg has been as good as advertised. I think I would vote for him today. I think he's been just I think he's just a better player than Janai Broome, but also I think I think he's got better stats and he's better than him head to head. And I think Duke is asking him to do more than Auburn is asking Janai Broome to do, but it is razor thin. And I reserve the right to change my opinion. Like, honestly, by the end of the show.
Yeah, I think what's crazy, I would vote Janai Broome right now. I just think that he is hands down the best player on the best team in the country, and he's so valuable for them. I mean, you say Cooper Flagg has better stats, but Janai Broome is averaging 18 and 11.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I don't know. I think Duke fans will point to Janai Broome missed some time with injury, even though
he missed 2 games. Yeah, he missed 2 games, and how much that matters, I don't know. I think that's when Cooper Flagg really took control of the race.
It was the right time. Yeah, I guess.
But then now Broome is back, and you're kind of like, why did we let Cooper Flagg just take control? But Cooper Flagg he's been fucking awesome, dude. And I do think Cooper Flagg's a better defender. That factors into it. But again, you're splitting hairs. Janai Broome is an unbelievable defender. I think they're both on, if there's top 5 list of defenders in the country, I think they're both on it. But I think Cooper Flagg's just a little more versatile for me, and I could change it. But Cooper Flagg also just had the worst game he's had all season on Saturday. He got hot late and did a little Mahomes, stat padding late in the game. But he was not good against Clemson on Saturday. So who knows? Maybe Cooper Flagg falls off a little bit, and I'll change my opinion. But yeah, the Player of the Year race is unreal, and I can't recommend watching those 2 guys. It's rare that you get the top 2 candidates on the top 2 teams. That rarely happens in college basketball. In fact, I don't know if it's ever really happened, or I can't remember a time it has happened. I should probably do some research on that and figure out when it's happened last, if it's ever happened at all. Other things quickly I want to rip off, and then I'll let you take control, Tate, and tell me what I missed out on. I think there's a great chance we get our first time national champion. I think that is something that I personally find interesting in college basketball. When you get Baylor breaking through and winning a national championship, you get a Virginia winning a national championship. I like new blood. I think it's great for the sport. A lot of people say that the blue bloods being good is great for the sport. I think that's probably true, but I also think getting people, Auburn is a great example. Auburn has not won a national championship yet, but Auburn fans just popping out of nowhere and suddenly caring about college basketball like 10 years ago, 7 years ago. I think that's been great for the sport, and I think getting pockets of people across the country that aren't locked in on college basketball suddenly locked in is very good, and the good way to do that is if your program wins the national championship. As it stands right now, 7 of the top 9 teams on KenPom have not won an NCAA tournament. Auburn, Houston, Tennessee, Bama, Purdue, Iowa State, and Texas Tech are 7 of the top 9, and there's a very, very good chance that, like we said with the tiers, Bama and Auburn and Duke are in the top tier. Obviously, Duke's won a lot, but Bama and Auburn have not, and a lot of the SEC has not. So, it's Florida, it's Duke, and then it's a bunch of teams that have never won before, and that's kind of right now where I would cut the line on teams that I expect to win the national championship is basically Florida, Duke, and then a handful of first timers, and so there's a very good chance we get a first time national champion this year. Yeah, definitely, it'll be interesting. You want to get into some of these other topics? Last point, one more point, and then we'll get into some other stuff. The freshmen have been awesome. I was the first point. Oh, go ahead. Well, yeah, no, you know what? Let's get into some of the other topics. One thing Titus was right about before the season started was he said freshmen are back. Mm-hmm. He said we've put a little too much stock in the transfer portal. I have a feeling this year's freshmen are going to be fucking awesome, more than just Cooper Flagg. Yeah. Talked about the freshmen. Yeah, the freshmen. So like you said, I think a lot of the offseason conversation in college basketball is focused on the transfer portal and the money being thrown around and NIL and all that stuff. Last year's freshman class was not good. The freshmen really. Last year's class was the worst in a little while, but I think my theory, and I said it just off the cuff in the preseason, and now that I've sat and thought about it, I actually think there's some truth to it. My theory is that COVID kind of fucked the development of a lot of guys, or a lot of the freshman class that were coming in. A lot of the young guys weren't as good because of the COVID situation that is now gone. Like the guys were missing out on development that previous freshman classes had gotten, and they weren't playing in as many tournaments, and when they were masking up or whatever the fuck that era was. there was an anomaly, and then we were getting just like weird mix of prospects coming in freshman classes. And it wasn't just that like they weren't as good. It was also, I think, that they were misranked. I think that played into it too, is that like the scouts, when they didn't get as much data on them. So like when you're saying this guy's like a top 5 recruit, he probably wasn't. If you would have gone through like a normal cycle of 4 years of grassroots basketball and you would have seen him through the years, you probably would have had a different opinion. Anyway, I think all of that reset with this freshman class, and we're back to like figuring out what the pecking order is, one, but also they are unbelievably talented. And like you said, it's not just Cooper Flagg; he is the best. He has the 2 teammates that I mentioned earlier on his team. They are also very good. But then there are guys like Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey at Rutgers have been as good as advertised, even though Rutgers is a disappointment, which we'll get into in a second. VJ Edgecombe is probably going to be a top 5 pick at Baylor. Started out a little slow offensively, but is a freak athlete, is now scoring the ball for them. He's unbelievable to watch. And then Robert Wright, the point guard they have, was kind of a throw-in for Baylor. He's been awesome too for them. So he's been the Baylor has 2 freshmen that have been really good. Tahad Pettiford's a kid that comes off the bench for Auburn, left-handed microwave type scorer. Just fucking electric. Pro, right? Like, yeah, like he's a guy that I fell in love with early in the season when they played at Houston, and he comes off the bench, and Houston just plays that like grind it out, muck it up defense, and it's just impossible to like break through and figure out how to unlock the Houston defense. And Tahad Pettiford comes in and is just fucking lightning out on the basketball court and just crossing dudes up, and just brought a different dynamic to Auburn, and he's a big reason why I'm a believer in Auburn. Even though Auburn's been good the past few years, they've kind of choked in the NCAA tournament. 2019 they made the Final Four, but last year was dreadful. They lose to Yale in the first round, and they were very highly thought of last year. One of the reasons I'm higher on Auburn this year, one, they're better than they were last year, but 2, they have a guy like Tahad Pettiford who can just take over, and he comes off the bench for them. Mm-hmm. LeBaron Philon at Alabama's been awesome. Derek Queen, yes, that is his real name. It sounds like Dairy Queen when you say it out loud, but he plays for Maryland. He's a big man who's dominant. He's so fun to watch and so smooth with it. Had a really good conference play rolled around. He took a little bit of a dip, but he's fucking awesome. Yakachunas at Illinois is probably going to be a top 10 pick. Illinois is an interesting team. They shoot a ton of threes. They don't really make a ton of threes. But Yakachunas, you watch him, and he hasn't really been playing particularly well as of late, but he is so smooth with it. He's a point guard that plays like a European. You can tell first of all, his name's Yakachunas, so that's kind of a giveaway. But also just the way he plays is it feels like your quintessential like Luka type, like a guy who's not like super athletic, but he's just under control at all times and can score the ball and is smooth with it and knows where his teammates are open and how to get them the ball. He's a freshman on Illinois that for a second there I thought was going to be first-team All-American. Asa Newell at Georgia is a big man who's fucking dominant. Trey Johnson at Texas is an unbelievable scorer. Shot selection can be a problem for him, but he's a guy who can go off for 40 on any given night, and is, you watch like 30 seconds of him playing basketball, you're like, yeah, that's a future pro immediately. At Trey Johnson at Texas. Jeremiah Fears at Oklahoma has been awesome for them. Liam McNeely has been the freshman for UConn. When he was out, UConn was bad, and we talked about UConn earlier and how good they can be, but Liam McNeely has been very, very good. I'm forgetting probably 10 to 15 more that's how good they've been that deserve shout-outs. But freshmen across the country have been – I said that earlier, like you said, in the preseason, that was one of my predictions. That's probably the one thing I got most right this year, is that I called that freshmen would be more impactful than transfers, and I think that's pretty true, right?
It's true, and I'm gonna move that into something else. You were right about one other thing that we haven't talked about yet. You called St. John's to the Final Four. Mm-hmm. St. John's is back.
St. John's is back.
Give us a Rick Pitino.
So fun surprises. There, I wrote down 3 fun surprises this year for teams. If you're looking to latch on to like a fun story, a team that hasn't been great as of late, but they're putting it together this year. There are 3 that come to mind. St. John's is certainly one of them. They have lost 3 games this year by a combined 5 points. They are in first place in the Big East, and barring a catastrophe, they will win the Big East, which they were highly thought of coming into the season. like you said, they were one of my dark horse picks to make the Final Four. I didn't think they would be this good. I thought they would be like a 6th seed in the NCAA tournament and then go on a run. That was my Final Four thought. When I said St. John's is the Final Four, I thought they're going to be up and down throughout the regular season, but then Pitino is going to lock them in for the NCAA tournament, and they'll make a Final Four run. They have been very good in the regular season. And they've done it by playing Rick Pitino basketball. Now they can't shoot, and the offense is worrisome, and that is cause for concern. The 3-point shooting is dreadful. The offense looks like just absolutely abysmal at times, but the press is unreal. They are working themselves into. They might be there by now. Like they are working themselves into maybe being the best defense in the country. Mm-hmm. And I think if you wanted to argue that St. John's has the most feared defense in the country, I wouldn't push back on that. As they're playing right now, it is the press is just causing havoc for everybody. I don't know. The Garden is rocking. They are in a position where they can basically clinch the Big East on Sunday versus Creighton. Not mathematically, but for all intents and purposes, if they beat Creighton on Sunday, it's going to take a catastrophe for them to not win the Big East. I think Rick Pitino might be my coach of the year. Now, Auburn fans are going to say, what about us? Bruce Pearl has us at number 1. And, I think the coach of the year race with Bruce Pearl and Rick Pitino, and in my mind, it's those two guys. And Auburn is better, and Auburn was not expected to be the best team in the country. So I imagine Bruce Pearl's going to end up winning it. But that just shows how good Rick Pitino has been, though, is that I do think that he is very much in the conversation, and I would probably vote for him because I didn't think I'd ever see St. John's be this good ever again in my life.
And you're right about that, and I think that he would be very deserving. The problem is Auburn, you said it, they were not supposed to be as good as they are, but they jumped onto the scene so quickly with such an impressive early season run that now it's like, oh yeah, that's Auburn. Bruce Pearl's done a hell of a job down there, obviously, and this team was not as high expectations as the teams they're beating. Yeah,
but Auburn was ranked 11th in the preseason. I think St. John's was unranked. So that's if you want to do that part where you're are you exceeding preseason? Is coach of the year you just exceeded preseason's expectations? I mean, an argument could be made that Rick Pitino having St. John's at, what are they, 20-3, 21-3 now?
Yeah, they're 12-1 in the Big East.
Their 3 losses are by combined 5 points, and 2 of them they kind of choked away, and they should have won. So they are absolutely rolling. The Big East isn't quite as strong as we're accustomed to it being, but it's still very much a good conference. It's a little top heavy though. It's a little the bottom of the Big East is dreadful, but they've been an awesome story and a very fun team. Even though you can kind of see how it might end prematurely for them, which is them going 3 for 26
very
from the
3-point.
Yeah, just bricking everything, and they play a team that can just not shit their pants against the press. But right now, every team's shitting their pants. Shitting their
I'm interested to see what their bracket looks like, because if they go ahead.
No, keep going. Sorry.
I was just saying if they face a team that can handle the basketball, they're infinitely less effective than if they can't.
The other 2 fun surprises quickly. Louisville, Kenny Payne was 12-52 in 2 years, and Pat Kelsey has them 18-6 this year. They are comfortably in the tournament right now. They're 12-1 in their last 13. Louisville is not back to being, if I'm going to talk about Rick Pitino, how about Louisville as a nice segue? They're not back to being Rick Pitino's level of Louisville, but they are back to being a respectable program that, like I said, if the season ended today, they would comfortably be in the tournament, and they play a fun brand of basketball, and the dark days are over for Louisville, it appears. We said that before, though. We've been there before, but I need to see this for a few more years, string together a few good years, and we'll officially declare the dark days over. But the Kenny Payne era is certainly over. The last 2 seasons were, oh my God, so bad. And then lastly, Missouri is a fun surprise. They're probably the biggest surprise, I would say, in all of college basketball. They ended last season losing 19 in a row. They lost 22 out of 23. They are currently 17-6 in the SEC. Like I said, the SEC is far and away the best conference in the country, and they're 6-4 in the SEC with wins over. I know Kansas isn't an SEC team, but they beat Kansas in non-conference and beat the brakes off of Kansas. And then they also beat Florida, who I think is national title good. They beat Florida in Gainesville. So Missouri has 2 massive wins, and they were among they were last year when the season ended. they felt like they were one of the worst power conference teams of all time last year, and now they are comfortably in the NCAA tournament of a snap of a finger. They're a fun team to check out if you want. How did you say it? Like they're a surprise, a fun bandwagon team, a fun team that's a program that's like resurging. Those are the three I would say. St. John's, Louisville, and Missouri are those three fan bases are probably having the most unexpected fun this year. If we put it that way. Like, they're probably – St. John's has the best chance of winning the national championship of those three, but I don't think St. John's is realistic national champion. But, like, all three of them know, like, we're probably not going to win the national championship, but goddamn, this has been such a fun year. Because this kind of came out of – yeah, Louisville after the 2 years they had.
Let's check in on some of the Blue Bloods. So you've already addressed Duke. Let's go down the road to North Carolina.
North Carolina, the North Carolina story, they were preseason top 10, I forget. RJ Davis was back, he was the only first-team All-American back this year. Every other first-team All-American from last year had moved on, but RJ Davis came back to North Carolina. I'll be succinct. They're having a bad year. They're going to miss the NCAA tournament probably. Hubert Davis is very much on the hot seat. They don't really have big men they can trust. RJ Davis is still, doing his like fucking hero ball thing, which like works sometimes and gets him buckets, and he scores a lot, but it's kind of like empty calorie scoring. They are a mismanaged roster, kind of like the pieces don't fit as well as we thought they would, and I don't know, they're just not a good team, and Hubert Davis is not coaching them well, and he's searching for answers, and I think that like he's very much on the hot seat, and Carolina has been among the biggest disappointments in college basketball this year, because even given the ups and downs of Hubert Davis, and the year they were ranked number one in the country in the preseason a couple years ago, and they missed the tournament. Last year they weren't really that bad, and I think there was an expectation that Carolina would at least like be a 5, a 6 seed or something. They're probably not going to make the tournament unless I don't know what it's going to take. Like beat Duke a couple times down the stretch. Like if they beat Duke in the ACC tournament and beat Duke at home, I don't know.
They already lost to Duke once though,
They got fucking destroyed by Duke. I think, by the way, I didn't say this after Duke Carolina game. I kind of glossed over it because it was such a bad game. I kind of feel like that rivalry might be dead. I feel like Carolina beating Duke and the way they did against Coach K, it's gonna take a lot for. It's weird because Duke beat the shit out of Carolina, but I feel like North Carolina ended Coach K's career, and not just they beat him his last game in Cameron, and then they beat him to end his career. And I feel like the highs of that, whether you're Carolina, Duke, or neutral, whatever, that was like a season finale or series finale, I should say, for that rivalry. And nothing that's really happened since has been particularly interesting to me.
Can Duke win a title this year and kind of flip that back on his head, or does that not even?
No, they got to win like 4 more titles. I don't know what, like, they got to beat Carolina by. It's got to be like 10 years of doing what they did to Carolina this year.
Cooper Flash.
But yeah, Carolina stinks, and they're a huge disappointment. But RJ Davis is still there. He was first team All-American last year. He's averaging what, like 20. God knows what. What is RJ Davis averaging this year? 17.4. He averaged 21 last year, so he's not scoring as well as he was, and he's, they have talent, but Carolina's a lost cause in my mind.
So they're a disappointment.
They're a disappointment.
They were preseason number 9, and they're not even close anymore.
Yeah.
Another team that had high preseason expectations, perhaps the highest preseason expectations you can have in a long time, would be another blue blood in Kansas.
Yeah.
They've been disappointing to you as well.
Kansas has been very disappointing. They're preseason number 1. Kansas's problem is they're almost too old. I think DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams just aren't that good. I think that like you're relying on 2 guys that just simply aren't that good. Hunter Dickinson is still there, and he's probably he's going to be an All-American again. He puts up insane stats, and he's very, very good at what he's good at, and he's very, very bad at what he's bad at. But Kansas, the analogy I'd use for Kansas is if you're trying to be optimistic about Kansas, you would say that they are what Ohio State football was this year, which is they have on paper, you see the roster and their names, They reloaded like last year they had the disappointing season. Last year was Hunter's first year at Kansas. They were preseason number 1 last year, and then they got spanked in the Sweet 16 second round against Gonzaga. I think it was second round. I don't even think they made the Sweet 16. I think Gonzaga beat the shit out of them in the second round. Very disappointing into the season for a team that was preseason number 1. They reloaded in the transfer portal. They brought in Zeke Mayo. They brought in AJ Storr. They brought in Rylan Griffin. And those 3 guys were their big gets in the offseason. Flory Badunga is a freshman who was Mr. Basketball in the state of Indiana, 5-star recruit. They also brought him in. And there was a belief that like we last year was last year. We brought back the core. They're going to be hungry. They're going to want to flush the bad taste from last year out. But then we also brought in the reinforcements. And you looked at the roster coming into the season. That they were ranked preseason number 1 for a reason. And they just haven't put it together. So if you're being optimistic, you could say that Kansas will do what Ohio State football did, which is once it comes time, let's lock in. Let's do a players only meeting where our coach is somehow involved, even though we're going to call it a players only meeting. Let's pray a lot together. Let's whatever the fuck Ohio State did to lock in and then demonstrate that yes, we are the most talented team in the country. The difference is I don't think Kansas is actually that talented.
Right.
I think that's the problem with Kansas is that they actually don't have the top end talent. But that is if you're looking for hope with Kansas, that's what you would tell yourself is that they're going to lock in when the moment comes. But I would say we thought that last year and that didn't happen. It just feels like a repeat of last year. I think they're slightly better than they were last year, but I don't see it with Kansas. They've also had with basketball, unlike football. They've had way more opportunities to pull it together. They've had more opportunities to like snap it. Let's get it going, boys. Let's and also Kansas's lows are way lower than Ohio State football.
100%.
So it's not even. That's a bad analogy. I don't even know why I brought that up.
But that makes sense with
just,
the talent perspective.
If I'm trying to simplify it, it's like the preseason hype, the thought process from the carryover from last year to this year. Bring a lot of guys back, bring in the reinforcements. Now let's go win a national championship, and then it's maybe the regular season isn't going as well. But Kansas is. I just don't think they're that good. I just think like at the end of the day, they just don't have that much talent as they think they do. There's a difference between talent and familiar names. They have familiar names. They don't have talent.
Yeah, they swung and missed a couple times.
They don't have the top-end national championship talent. They just have guys that have worn Kansas jerseys for a while, and you get used to them because they're on TV all the time.
Speaking of a little disappointing, and I know you could talk about this for hours, but a team that is not living up to the hype and might be a little hot seat situation, step down end of season. Talk Indiana with us.
Indiana, probably not going to make the tournament also unless they get very hot down the stretch. Mike Woodson has already said he's going to retire at the end of the year. They were a transfer portal team. They brought in they might have won the offseason, to be completely honest. Of all the teams in college basketball, they went out and got basically everybody they wanted. McNeely was committed. Liam McNeely was committed to Indiana. He decommitted and went to UConn. I think that was like their one miss. But otherwise, like everything that could have gone – everything that Indiana wanted to have happen in the offseason happened. They brought in Umar Ballo from Arizona and Miles Rice and Luke Goody from Illinois, who's not their best player but was like a good as an Indiana kid and a good reinforcement off the bench. They answered Cannon Carlisle. They get in the transfer portal as well. They got everything they wanted. What they didn't get was a coach who knows what the fuck he's doing, and they are just an absolute mess. They play dreadful basketball. The pieces don't fit. They are. It's such a slog to watch Indiana play basketball, and it's such like an uninspiring brand of basketball, and Indiana fans are at their wits' end. And finally, Mike Woodson, whether he was nudged out the door or not, the news broke last week that Mike Woodson will, in fact, not be there next year. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, Indiana they're still technically on the bubble. Like, I think there's no Indiana fan believes that they're going to actually make the tournament. No Indiana fan is like, we can pull this together and make this happen. I think they're very much on the wrong side of the bubble, but I don't think they're quite technically dead yet. But yeah, they've lost what, 5 in a row, 6 in a row, 4 in a row.
They're drowning.
They're not good at all. But there's. Yeah, I think that like they have Purdue still coming up. If they could, I don't even know why I'm entertaining the hypothetical.
I would say they've lost 5 in a row and 7 of 8. Yeah, if they're gonna win out, you could talk they're on the bubble, but they're not.
Yeah, they're very much on the wrong side of the bubble. But yeah, I don't know. I was just trying to. They're not gonna make the tournament. They're not gonna make the tournament. Indiana and North Carolina are not gonna make the tournament. And I thought like Woodson. I thought them saying Woodson wouldn't be here next year might like galvanize the team a little bit, but it'll probably do the opposite. They'll probably just quit on him now.
Yeah, he's not our boss.
If you're a hater of NIL and the transfer portal, Indiana would be a good team to point to, because you could argue, like, you watch some of the, like, Umar Ballo has had stretches where it just looks like he just does not give a fuck. And like, if you want to be like an old head that's like, these kids don't care about the name on the front of the jersey, they care. Well, Indiana doesn't have names on the back. They only care about the checks clearing and all that. Indiana would be. That'd be a good team to point to, but yeah, they suck ass.
Let's check in with some of the first-year coaches this year, and I think a good place to start would be we had John Calipari leave Kentucky to go to Arkansas. Mark Pope goes to Kentucky. How are they both doing in their first year?
So Arkansas played at Kentucky. What was that? 2 weeks ago? Mm-hmm. Last week? 10 days ago, something like that.
On the first.
The Arkansas is not a – Kentucky's having a much better year. Kentucky, for most of the season, Kentucky was a fun surprise. They basically reset their entire roster. Mark Pope takes over for Cal. Everybody's out. He brings in he hits the transfer portal hard, gets a bunch of old guys, a bunch of names you might recognize. If you like, Lamont Butler is the point guard. He played on the San Diego State team that made the Final Four a couple years ago. But they brought in a bunch of old dudes. They were a very, very fun surprise. They were playing a very fun brand of basketball. They've cooled off a little bit since, but Arkansas was the opposite, where Cal brought in like all of his guys. Like he takes DJ Wagner from Kentucky and Big Z from Kentucky. Boogie Fland is a big freshman that he brought in that was really, really good for him, but is now out for the season. John L. Davis from FAU. You might remember him on the FAU team that went to the Final Four. He was playing for Arkansas. He still is. But Arkansas was not Thiero, by the way, from Kentucky. I'm just thinking through Arkansas's roster. Adu Thiero was a Kentucky transfer as well. Arkansas had a bunch of really good pieces. They were not playing well together at all for most of the season. Kentucky was a fun surprise, and they were playing well. And then they played each other, and Cal got the better of Kentucky and had the last laugh. And that was kind of, as far as off-court stories go in college basketball, that was one of the bigger moments, was John Calipari coming back to Lexington in a position where Kentucky had a much better team than Arkansas, and Arkansas kind of beat the shit out of them. Handily handed Kentucky their asses. Kentucky's reeling a little bit. I still think Mark Pope is an awesome coach. I still think that, like, when he gets the guys that he wants and he starts getting like top end talent, like Kentucky is, they were top 10 for a long time this season, and they have maybe 0 NBA players. They'll have guys that'll play in the, like, but as far as like 5 to 7 years from now, how many guys will be on NBA rosters? If you told me nobody on this Kentucky team will be in the NBA 5 to 7 years from now, I wouldn't be surprised. And yet they were still playing really, really well. So I think Mark Pope is going to be awesome at Kentucky. Arkansas, though, is coming back to life right now. Arkansas is the idea of Arkansas making the NCAA tournament has my blood flowing a little bit. I would love to see Arkansas in the NCAA tournament because I want John Calipari in the NCAA tournament just so when he loses we can laugh at him. I think the narrative was, so Arkansas was a huge disappointment to start the season. They lost a bunch of games in a row, and I think people could kind of smell the blood in the water. Yeah. And they were like, they love it, they love it, they love it. He went back to Rupp Arena, had no business of beating his former team, kind of kicked the shit out of him, and now I feel like the national, like, the meter has completely swayed to, let's get Arkansas in this tournament. Yeah. It's fun for the sport. Yeah. It is. They also, like, John L. Davis has been great lately, and they have names that you would recognize, not only just John Calipari, but the roster is guys you might recognize if you're watching college basketball. So in the last few years, so them being in the NCAA tournament would be great. But if they do make the NCAA tournament, that means the SEC probably got 14 teams, which is fucking crazy. Yeah. So Mark Pope has been great at Kentucky, though. I think every Kentucky fan's happy, even though for a second there it was like, oh shit, can Kentucky like make a Final Four, win the national championship? I don't think so. Their defense is dreadful, but they are very, very fun to watch. And maybe like we wrap up the show with that, I guess. Is there anything else that I'm missing out on? Dusty Mays at Michigan, they're having a great year. It's interesting. Michigan just played at Indiana, and Dusty May was asked about the Indiana job because Dusty May's from Indiana, went to Indiana, was a manager under Bob Knight, and has those Indiana ties. And people thought Indiana was going to hire him was going to fire Mike Woodson last year and hire Dusty May, and then they just announced that Mike Woodson's stepping down as Dusty May's bringing his team into Assembly Hall, and he was asked about it, and sort of, I don't know how you're supposed to answer that question if you're a coach, because, even if the answer is like no, you don't want to, if you're in Dusty May's shoes, and you're like, listen, I have no fucking interest whatsoever in an Indiana job, you don't want to shit on your alma mater too much. I'm sure there's a part of them that still loves Indiana and 100%. Still loves that school, so you don't want to shit on them too much, but also,
if you leave a sliver of ambiguity, though, your whole school is now saying,
and that's kind of what he did, was he left the sliver of ambiguity. So it's like, that's an interesting dynamic there. Is like, is Indiana going to go after Dusty May even though he's in his first year at Michigan? And if they do go after him, will he leave? Or is Michigan the better job at this point? That'll be it. He's going to leave. He's an Indiana guy and he loves IU. I think he would leave if they offered him the job. But he's been killing it at Michigan. They have a 7-footer, Danny Wolf, who you might remember playing at Yale last year when they beat up on Auburn is what I'm thinking of in the first round of the tournament. So Danny Wolf is a 7-footer. He's kind of a college basketball version of Jokic, more or less. He's just a 7-footer that handles the ball and has great vision and basically is sort of their point guard. He's kind of their de facto point guard, and the offense runs through him. And they play 2 7-footers at once, and Michigan's having a great year. They turn the ball over like crazy. I don't trust their backcourt. I don't know how good they're actually. I don't trust that they're like Final Four good, but Dusty May is doing a good job at Michigan in year one, so there's that as well.
It has been kind of the year of the coaches as well. That's one other thing I wanted to touch on was, so we talked about Hurley being the villain. Mick Cronin had his moments of being a little psycho.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Mick Cronin. The wheels were falling off from Mick Cronin there for a second, but he's figured it out.
And then can we check in on Doug Gottlieb?
Oh yeah, Doug Gottlieb. That's a story we got to talk about. Doug Gottlieb is coaching
the radio guy
at Green Bay, the radio guy, and you're like, oh, he quit his radio show to coach at Green Bay? No, he didn't. In fact, he was in New Orleans at Media Row as his college basketball season is going on. So how is this experiment going, you might ask? Go ahead and tell them, Tate, how the experiment is going.
The Green Bay Phoenix, after winning Game 3 of the season and winning Game 5 of the season to be 2-3 on the year, are now 2-23 on the year. They have not won one game in the Horizon League.
Unreal. He's ruining it for podcasters everywhere. Podcasters like me that want to be a coach. By the way, I'm like,
they're 0-14.
I'm clicking around and Indiana's KenPom page just popped up at me. I didn't realize that they lost.
Yeah, they're out.
That they're that out because they've had, like, the Purdue game was close. The Michigan game they were down by a lot, came back, and that was close. The Maryland game was they should have won and they fucked it up. They haven't completely bottomed out. I didn't realize that they had lost though.
Yeah, they're out.
They've lost 7 of 8. I didn't realize it was that bad. Because they've had like moments where you're like, that was just right there. If they just, they fucking suck. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up, rapid fire with this, because this is important. These are the fun teams that play fast. They shoot the ball well. They're offensive minded. These are the teams to watch. If you don't care who wins or loses, but you just want to watch some fun basketball, get up and down, push tempo, shoot threes, make threes, whatever. Kentucky's one of them. Kentucky has like I said, fallen off a little bit as like a serious national title contender, but they are very, very fun to watch. Can't recommend watching Kentucky play basketball enough. Alabama's one of them. They're not shooting as well as over the course of the season, but they're still one of the more fun teams to watch in college basketball. Memphis is a lot of fun to watch. Great guard play. They're the best 3-point shooting team in the country. They're actually a dark horse in my opinion to go to a Final Four. I think they are. They had a good showing in Maui, and then they're in a not great conference, so they kind of fallen off the radar a little bit. But Memphis is racking up a ton of wins, and they have great guard play, and guard play matters in March, as we know. Florida is a ton of fun to watch. Auburn is a ton of fun to watch. Arizona, Illinois, and Gonzaga, they all play fast and shoot threes. They're not really that great at shooting, but they can be fun to watch on the right night. So they're teams to circle and maybe tune into. And then Creighton and Wisconsin are 2 teams that don't play particularly fast, but they play a fun brand of basketball. Like the only knock on them in the fun category would be they're not exactly like pushing it in transition and trying to get shots up in 7 seconds or less or whatever. But at the same time, they shoot a lot of threes, make a lot of threes. Wisconsin is the big big surprise in that regard. Like if you think you know Wisconsin basketball, I promise you do not know this Wisconsin team. They shoot a ton of threes. They're playing way faster than they usually do. Very guard dominated. John Tonji, John Blackwell. Those are the two guards that have turned Wisconsin basketball. The Bo Ryan era has been turned on its head, and they are very fun. And then conversely, the teams that are good but are disgusting to watch that you might want to watch out for, like you see them ranked high and you're like, I should tune into this team. I'm sure I'll enjoy watching them. Tennessee is the number one.
Yeah, perfect.
Tennessee is the perfect answer. Like they play quintessential Tennessee basketball where it's a fucking rock fight and they love it, and that's how they're going to win games. Last year's Tennessee team wasn't that way. With Dalton Connect, they became very, very fun. So that's the important PSA here, is that Tennessee is back to being Tennessee, where like, yes, they are good. Yes, they can win. Yes, they can maybe make a Final Four. Hell, win a national championship. But if they do so, it's going to be ugly along the way. UCLA is another one that's that way. And then Houston's only problem is they're good at defense and they play slow, but their offense is actually really efficient and fun to watch. And I think Houston is like they shoot the ball really, really well. But Houston might be a tough watch for some people because they play slow and it's really hard for other teams to score on them. So there you go. I think I hit as much as I can. I don't know. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, that was a lot.
I feel like
Welcome
there's
back.
something in there. College basketball. There you go. That's everything you need to know. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, Jace Richardson. I wrote that down. That might be of note to some people. Jason Richardson's son might be Michigan State's best player. In fact, this would be the time to say it, because if you watched the game against Oregon over the weekend, he was fucking awesome. And Jason Richardson and Mateen Cleaves were in attendance, and he had the one layup where he pulled it back a little hezzy, a little sauce on it, and then like went up and under, and like he's been nasty for them, Jace Richardson. I've been saying about Michigan State all season that I think they've bought into the culture. I think they play great ISO basketball, great defense, great rebounding, yada yada yada. My problem was like they don't have elite talent, elite individual talent. Jace Richardson is slowly becoming that. Like he's maybe not so slowly, maybe it's happened quickly, but yeah, Jason Richardson, yes, that Jason Richardson. His son is playing at Michigan. He's a freshman. Speaking of all the great freshmen, and he might be their best player. And Michigan State is a top 10 team. They're one of the best teams in the Big Ten. So, and Dickie V is back. I guess we say that Dickie V called the Clemson Duke game. He's back to college basketball. That's about it. I think that's it. I think we did it. All right, so now you're plugged in. Now all of you can join us on this journey for the rest of the college basketball season. For those of you that have been listening and watching every show, I apologize for maybe a boring show, or I'm just saying things you all already know. But this is one of the more fun shows I do, and I think people find it useful, and certainly hope the new audience that's tuning into college basketball now knows what they need to know for what will promise to be a very fun final 2 months. It is going to be awesome. All these conference races are still close. I don't know. Duke is going to win the ACC. Other than that, St. John's is in the driver's seat, but they're not. There's still work to be done there. The Big Ten's wide open. The SEC, it feels like it's Auburn's, but Bama's right there as well. So
and
like
they
still play twice. So it is far, far, far from over. And the Big 12 is again, like there's Houston is the favorite and in first place, but it's anything can happen in the Big 12. So all the conference races are awesome. The Player of the Year race is awesome. It's been a great college basketball season, and hopefully you'll join us for the rest of the year. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on Thursday.